Good morning. It's still morning here in Tennessee, Central Time. Good morning. Nice to see you all. Welcome to my stream. I am blatantly trying to get views for my new channel by talking about a hot topic in the world of theology and apologetics, and that would be Mr. Wes Huff. So that's what the stream's going to be about. I have titled my video "The Gospel of Wes Huff," so we'll see how that goes. But I'm trying something a little different today. Last time I read off a script. I don't know how that came off. I go a little too fast when I read off a script. And so I need to slow my reading down, maybe get a teleprompter because I don't think it looked too good. Nobody commented, so I'm not probably going to get a lot of views either way, but wanted to weigh in on this because, well, the last month or two, I've seen a lot of content, a lot of people talking about this character, Wes Huff, and I think it's a really interesting phenomenon, what's happening with him. So yeah, I mean, I don't know what's going on with you guys. Anything new? I'll get started in a few minutes here. Uh, if anybody has anything they want to chat about, drop it in the live chat. If anybody's watching, I don't think anyone is, but that's okay. So, yeah, just having a good Saturday. Went to the gym this morning. What else? Um, wrote this video, working on some affiliate marketing projects. Got to detail the car later. Just anyway, let's get started. Okay. Gospel of Wes Huff. So this is Wes Huff here. Let me go to the right screen. Maybe you've seen this guy. He's a fit guy from Canada. He's an apologist, young fella working on his PhD. Seems like a smart guy, nice guy, has a good command of the issues, the texts. Maybe you watched his debate with Billy Carson, and that's how he blew up. And a lot of people have talked about this. People smarter than me have talked about all the arguments he made and how they were good and bad on Joe Rogan about the Isaiah Scroll and Dead Sea Scrolls and the Gospel of Barnabas and what was the other one that he debunked for Billy Carson. But anyway, I'm not going to really get into that stuff because it's been done. I'm just going to give my commentary on the whole situation with Wes Huff, okay, and what it means about Christian apologetics as a whole. Okay, so is Wes Huff the intellectual David slaying Goliaths of skepticism, like his Christian fans are painting him as? Or is he just a gladiator performing for the Christian crowd while dodging real opponents? Which you could say about a lot of apologists, right? So here he is, Wes Huff, Canadian apologist, PhD candidate, rising star in Christian circles. He had a debate with Billy Carson on a podcast I forget the name of. I'm sure you can see clips of it. It's been all over the YouTubes for months now, and he won. He did a good job. He won. He beat Billy Carson on several points. There's some back and forth about that whole debate, whether Billy was aware of the type of debate it was going to be, if he was prepared, whatever. It's not really important. And then that kind of catapulted him into stardom, and he went on the Joe Rogan Experience. So yeah, here's the forbidden. You can find this on YouTube, but this is Billy Carson. He's an author and a speculator about fringe topics in the world of history and theology. He believes in a lot of alternative views of what went down in history. So he talks about like the Emerald Tablets of Thoth and ancient aliens and stuff you'll see on the History Channel, right? Alongside Georgia Tsoukalos, that kind of stuff. Interesting guy, fun guy. I mean, I've been on the internet looking at this stuff for a long time, and theories like his have been around forever. Let me check and see if my audio is working real quick. Yeah, so Billy, he's been around for a while, and I remember first encountering the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, which he's big on, which they're probably a medieval forgery, but it had a huge influence on things and how the medieval world developed, medieval occultism and that kind of thing. Yeah, so Billy, he's been around for a while. Look at that. I'm doing a presentation. I'm like a pro YouTuber here. So but yeah, the Emerald Tablets of Thoth are interesting. Even if it is a forgery, these ancient documents that these people put together, they're really like compiling, oral histories and ideas that people had about the past, and it gives you a glimpse into the mind of the people who wrote those things and how they were thinking about the world. So even if it is a forgery, it's still interesting. It kind of paints a picture of what medieval occultists were into and how they thought about things. And I remember reading a little bit of it back in 2011, and basically it's telling you that you can't just believe in the right deity and hope to get into heaven. You got to do the work. You got to work on yourself. You got to foster and foment a spirit, a soul within you to achieve eternal life. Right? You can't just hope and pray that it's going to happen. So through things like meditation and visualization and different rituals, you kind of grow an eternal soul inside of you, and then once your physical body dies, if you've done enough of that spiritual work, then you can go on and have an eternal existence with that spirit that you built up, that soul that you built up. And actually, Mark Stavish from the Egregore book, he has a book all about that as well. I can't remember the name of it. Can look it up. But anyway, interesting guy. But was he really the Bible scholar that Wes Huff, a PhD candidate, should have debated? And Christians are acting like he just took down, like, I don't know, Richard Dawkins or Bart Ehrman or something. But really, Wes Huff, he's more than anything an entertainer, despite of what he claims to be. Yeah, he went on the Joe Rogan Experience and he defended the Christianity and gave some apologetics arguments on there. But yeah, this is Billy Carson's two of his books. Okay, he writes the Emerald Tablets. This is about Egyptian gods. He talks about the fractal holographic universe, matrix code revealed, and topics like that. They're fringe, they're interesting, but I mean, the scholars aren't really going to take this kind of stuff seriously. This is not this is not the atheist pope. Okay, this is a fringe entertainer guy you might find on Ancient Aliens, right? So Wes debunked a few of his wild claims, and people are acting like it's this big victory. So why are Christians acting like that? Well, it's because Christian apologetics is more like gladiatorial combat than anything else. If you were to get a real like Christian scholar in there to talk to Wes Huff, a lot of these guys are not really seasoned debaters. They're more interested in talking about facts and evidence and the nuance of these different issues, and not trying to necessarily score points and win an argument. They're just trying to show, like, look, these issues with the Bible, the authorship, the different inconsistencies and inerrancies we have, and the issue of dating manuscripts and things like that. They're more nuanced than we like to think. And it doesn't help bolster the old time religion of evangelical Christianity. But this is the kind of conversation you would have with an academic scholar of the Bible. But Christians in the apologetics circle, they want to see blood. They want to see their guy, their champion, Wes Huff, used to be like William Lane Craig and people like that, score points and land rhetorical blows on their opponent because it makes them feel better about their faith, right? So this is not really the same thing as wanting to have an open dialogue about the strengths and weaknesses of the faith. This is just a show. It's entertainment. It's bread and circuses, right? So instead of debating an internet personality like Billy Carson and landing these blows for the entertainment of the Christian world, if Wes wanted to be taken seriously as an intellect on the Bible, he should talk to somebody like Bart Ehrman or Elaine Pagels or Dale Allison. People like actual scholars of the Bible who work in universities and know the original languages and do analysis of the primary sources and the texts, and people like this, right? But typically you don't see apologists doing this. Why? Because apologetics is not for it's not for non-believers. It's not for trying to convince people who don't believe. It's for people who already believe and want to have their faith confirmed and reaffirmed by a person who uses big words and has fancy ancient books on the shelf behind them, so they can feel better about what they believe, because all these smart people, these evil liberal elites on the coastal universities, are saying things about their faith that make them feel scared, make them feel like they might be wrong, right? So they want to champion, like Wes Huff, people who sound like they're on the same intellectual and scholarly level as these people, these biblical scholars in universities, to land these rhetorical blows so they feel good. That's what it's all about. It's bread and circuses. And why do we have bread and circuses, right? Why did the Roman Empire employ them? It's because there were major issues in the Roman world, the ancient Roman world, economic issues. Things were falling apart, and so instead of effectively addressing these issues, the Roman government just threw gladiator combat, and they threw Christians to the lions, allegedly, though that's debated. They had games and circuses to distract the people with and also the bread, so they wouldn't revolt and riot against the crumbling infrastructure of their society. And I could say something similar about the crumbling infrastructure of Christianity in the 21st century. This is why apologetics has taken the form that it has taken, right? So it used to be easier for Christians before the advent of the internet to kind of stay in their little bubble and, not really be challenged on their ideas, right? In a serious way, and they could just kind of go back to their community, and you might have the village atheist or something, but people just kind of didn't take them seriously. But then all of a sudden, let me scroll down here. Okay, sorry about that. Then all of a sudden, the internet comes online in the early '90s, and people, Christians who are open-minded and sincere and want to know the truth, and they want to have their faith challenged, they encounter all this scholarship and all these narratives and ideas about their faith that they probably wouldn't have otherwise unless they went to university. So now you have, solid critiques and arguments against the claims of the Christian church that can be accessed by anyone anywhere in the world with an internet connection. And that's, it's like, to the Christian faith, it's like salt to a slug, that kind of stuff. So now anybody curious can go and find the historical contradictions in the Bible. They can find what serious biblical scholars say about the Bible and its authorship. They can find just, the different contradictions within the text itself. Like I'll think of a glaring one here where in the beginning of Samuel and the beginning of Chronicles has the same story about there being a census commanded, but in one book, this is the exact same story. In one book, it's commanded by Yahweh, and in the other book, it's commanded by Satan, right? So who is it? And that's, it seems on the surface like a black and white discussion, but you get into it and you realize that in the Old Testament times, Satan was not really a person, but more of a title, like a role inside of a courtroom, the accuser, right? So Yahweh was acting in the role of Satan. So you get into it and you realize there's more to it. But the point is that it makes you think that some of the claims that you're brought up with, the black and white understanding of Christianity, is just not accurate. And you start going down a rabbit trail and finding out that there's a lot of that in Christianity. So that's the impact of the internet on the faith. And this is why apologetics has devolved into what it has, because honest, sincere, open-minded, intellectual seeking people who are believers, they're going to find this information and eventually they're going to leave the faith. They're going to deconstruct because that's what makes the most sense. That's the most rational response to encountering that information. And so it leaves you, the only people who in the faith who are online are people who want to see the blood. They want to see the blood sports, the rhetorical blows, the bread-and-circuses. And then those are the Christians online. And these people are not, I'm sorry to say, I don't want to be insulting, but I don't think they're intellectually honest. They don't really want to look at the evidence. They don't really want to listen to the arguments. They want to have their they want to have their beliefs that they already have reconfirmed over and over again, so they feel better. So, and I mean, you've seen this online. You've seen people, you probably know people in your life. Maybe you're one of them who've deconstructed their faith in the last decade, 2 decades. Okay, we got some viewers. Anybody have a chat? Throw it in the chat. I will respond to it. I'll check it every now and then. Okay. So, but here's the point about Wes Huff and apologetics, okay? He had this controversy. Alex O'Connor did a video response to it. He made a claim about the Isaiah scroll within the Dead Sea Scrolls on the Joe Rogan Experience, right? The claim was that the Isaiah scroll that they discovered was almost completely identical to the text of Isaiah that we have in the Masoretic texts, which kind of confirmed the ancientness of the Isaiah book, right? It wasn't crafted later on. Okay, fine. So what? I mean, who can like Isaiah? It could have been written by the hand of the prophet Isaiah itself in 1000 BC. It doesn't. I mean, ultimately, that doesn't matter. These discussions about authorship. Mark was written by Mark. Matthew was written by Matthew. Luke was written by Luke. John. Let's just say the authorship of each book is 100% solid according to what the church claims. Let's say that the Bible is 100% historically accurate. Let's say that all the miracle claims in the Bible are true, that the Garden of Eden really happened, Noah's flood really happened. Let's say Ken Hovind is the most 100% right about Christianity. Let's grant all this. So what? That's not the main problem. The main problem is the moral failings of Christianity and of Yahweh and of the whole system that they teach you. It is morally abhorrent. Okay, that's the problem. So all this stuff about dating texts and the gospel authorship and when was Mark written and did Paul, you know what I'm saying. What was the earliest mention of Jesus and all this? It doesn't matter. Even if Jesus resurrected from the dead as described, it doesn't ultimately matter, because the question is it right to be a Christian? Is it morally good to be a Christian? Okay. And you can take the Bible completely at face value, like Kent Hovind would have you do, and that question is not resolved. And in fact, it seems that the answer to that question should be no, it is wrong if you want to be a good moral person to be a Christian. Let me explain why. And you've probably encountered this stuff before, but here we go. Who's God talking to? Let us make man in our image. Great question. I'm about to get into the Garden of Eden, actually, Travis. So, in the original Hebrew, the word God is translated from the Hebrew word Elohim, right? And the Masoretic text, it says Yahweh Elohim, but the original Old Testament that, let's say, the apostles and Jesus would have read was the Greek Old Testament, the Septuagint, which was created by some scholars after the Maccabean War, maybe a century before the ministry of Jesus was said to have happened, right? And in the Greek Old Testament, maybe I'm mistaken on this, but overconsumed. Okay, I'm gonna answer AML MLLC's question in a second, but let me just respond to Travis. So, in the Greek Old Testament that the apostles would have used, it didn't say Yahweh Elohim; it just said Elohim, and that's just a plural word for gods. Basically, it's small g gods, if you want to put it simply. So these are just, they're gods. They're like Yahweh, Zeus, Thor, Hermes, Baal, whatever. It was common among ancient Near Eastern people during that time to believe in small g gods, and Yahweh was one of these gods, right? But in the Old Testament, God is Elohim. So let us, it's a group of gods, make man in our image. So they're creating humans to be in the image of these gods. So presumably these gods look like us. That's what it means. It's not Yahweh. But again, I'm granting the Kent Hovind interpretation of scripture for the purpose of this video. So, and then we got AML MLLC. I've overconsumed YouTube Christian content to the point I don't know how to take the next step in my faith. Protestant Church, Catholic Church, Orthodox, false prophets, prophetic word, etc. Thoughts? I'm not a Christian anymore. I've deconstructed. I went from Pentecostal Christianity, that was my childhood faith. Had a brief stint with atheism at like age 19. Went into more like Reformed theology. No problem, Travis. Went into more like Reformed theology, Calvinism as a guy in my 20s, and then eventually became Catholic because I realized sola scriptura was bunk, and I thought maybe Catholic apologetics could save the whole kit and caboodle, but it still falls apart ultimately. So, if you want to remain a Christian, I don't know what to tell you, my friend. Probably one of the more open-minded, welcoming Christian groups, sects would be my recommendation. But ultimately, I just think that you need to find a connection to God, the creator, the source, a God of your own understanding, like they talk about in AA. Find that connection within you, whatever makes the most sense to you. And, trust that you have an innate sense of right and wrong within you, whether that's evolutionary or spiritual or whatever it is, that you got to trust yourself to be able to know right from wrong and to serve that higher power and trust that it's good. And you don't have to marry that to the Bible and Yahweh. It doesn't have to be the same thing. So that's what I would say. Let's see. Okay, so that's the questions answered. Hope that was helpful. So yeah, is it good to be a Christian? I don't think so. The reason why. Yahweh. Yahweh in the Old Testament, he's a liar. He's a murderer. He commands genocide. He says it's okay to rape and take slaves. And then the whole situation with hellfire and damnation, the atonement of Jesus Christ and that whole system, it's all messed up. It's all evil if you look at it. Okay. So we got, in 1 Kings 22:23. Oh, let me change the slide here. So yeah, here's the Bible. Okay. So yeah, the Bible being questioned on the internet. I made some slides and stopped using them. Okay. So here's, dichotomy of people kind of debating Christianity, the Bible, and barren wasteland. Okay. So here's Yahweh in the Old Testament, right? He's this towering figure. He's angry at humanity for not doing what he said. Okay. So here's Yahweh in the Garden of Eden. We can stop there for a second. Okay. So, yeah, in the Bible, God lied. Actually, in Genesis 3, because he said, again, pretend that this is Yahweh as Christians believe him. We just talked about how it isn't, but let's just take it at face value. He said to Adam and Eve, you know, don't eat this fruit on this tree. If you do, you're going to die. Plain reading of the text. If you eat the fruit, you're going to die. Doesn't mean you are eventually going to die. And in fact, it's implied in the text that humans were not immortal at that point anyway. They would die if they stopped eating from the tree of life, right? So they weren't actually immortal. So the implication is that they would die eating from the tree of the fruit of knowledge of good and evil, the fruit of the tree. Anyway, so what did they do? They ate the fruit. Did they die? No. So Yahweh lied, right? Simple, plain reading of the text. You bring this up to a Christian who refuses to, see what you're saying. They're going to twist themselves up into knots. They're going to start going to verses and other parts of the Bible. They're going to start creating this whole theological framework to make the text say what it doesn't say, make it look like Yahweh didn't lie. Let me pause this. Hang on a second. That's my ringtone. 1 second. Okay, sorry, that was my wife. Okay, so we got another question from Travis. Can a person be a Bible reading believer without going into any church? I mean, yeah, of course. Person can read and believe the Bible any way they want to and not go to church. Yeah, not a problem. I mean, you can do what you want, right? Um. Anyway, so what was I saying? Where was I? Yeah, so he lied. So, and then what did the snake say to the Adam and Eve? The snake said, "If you eat the fruit, then your eyes will be open, and you will know right from wrong, and you'll be like gods, like the gods, like Elohim." And who was telling the truth? It was actually the snake, right? Not Elohim. Elohim lied to the people, and because that gets into a whole thing. That's kind of Billy Carson territory, but it's because they were afraid that if people knew right from wrong and they knew their ability, they could rise up and threaten the gods. And then you see this later on in the story when they build the Tower of Babel, right? So it all plays out. So the Christian reading of Genesis is just silly, but if you take it at face value, God lied, Satan told the truth. So troubling, I would say, to say the least. And then what happens? Yahweh gets mad at Adam and Eve, and he kicks them out of the Garden of Eden, curses them and all of their descendants, us, for all the rest of time. They have painful childbirth. They had to toil and work the land and have this miserable, suffering existence. And because they ate this fruit that he said not to eat, pretty silly again, because Adam and Eve didn't know right from wrong. That would be like punishing a toddler for touching a hot stove after you told them not to. The toddler doesn't know right from wrong, and in response, you kick them out of your house and make them live on the streets for the rest of time, right? That'd be an insane, ridiculous, evil punishment. But that's essentially what happened here. In fact, it's even worse because now it says the only way you can get back in God's good graces is to have a chance to have eternal life and to, have some kind of happiness and all these is you have to follow every single law that Yahweh lays down. You have to join his blood sacrifice cult. And if you don't, he's threatening you and your loved ones with eternal torture by fire and hell. So that's evil. I mean, it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Only somebody who already believes in Christianity before they really picked up the Bible and read it and thought about the theology for themselves would look at that idea and say, "Oh, that's a good thing." So even if Yahweh exists and is this all-powerful being, even if he created humanity, that system is still evil. Why would you want to serve a God that would do something like that? It's morally horrific. It's worse than the worst villain in history, you know. So billions of people burning in hell if this is true. And who created the situation? Yahweh. So AML MLLC. Even as a Christian, the idea of heaven or hell is actually confusing. You mean I have to think forever? Sounds exhausting. What are your thoughts on afterlife? I mean, it's one of the great mysteries. I'm hopeful that there's an afterlife. I mean, I like, I'm kind of partial to the idea of simulation theory and all that. And I think there's some ancient support for that idea going back into like Hinduism and different esoteric beliefs. But ultimately, we don't know. It's just speculation. Thinking forever, that would be exhausting. So the thinking part of your mind, that's your ego. You need to practice things like meditation and different practices like that, and learn how to quiet that part of your mind. That's your animal mind. That's the part of you that's worried about dying and worrying about how to survive, right? I would say if there is an eternal part of you, that's the part of you that is connected to the source of all creation, and it doesn't have to constantly be having thoughts, and it can just relax and be at peace and in being and existing, right? So, I mean, I think potentially if you're a conscious being that's sort of connected to that source, you could be in a state of bliss, in a state of relaxation for potentially millennia and not have to think a thought and just be at peace. I mean, who knows? I'm just speculating, but or maybe there's nothing after this, in which case, make the best out of your life, enjoy yourself, find somebody to love and treat them well and leave your mark on the world in a positive way. That's what I would say. That's what the pagans, the Vikings, they would do. They would try to leave a mark because they didn't think there was anything after this, so they would try to make an impact, so people would remember them, and that's how they would live on forever. Some of them, we get the word hell from the Vikings, so obviously some of them believed in the afterlife. But anyway, it's complicated, like always. Okay, and then of course we have the fact that Yahweh is uh, he wants blood. He needs blood to assuage his guilt. He's so mad at us for what happened in the garden and all the sins that we do, even though he created us. He needs the blood of animals to feel better about it, to not be so mad at us, to not want to punish us. I mean, I don't know. What do you say about that? It's crazy. So, I mean, another example, this is barbaric, this is evil. And then, of course, we did all these sins, we committed all these crimes, and the only way to assuage his guilt, to his wrath for the guilt that we have, they often put it into terms of like legality and courtroom, and is Christ's atonement. So God himself, Yahweh, took on human flesh, came down to the earth, and he had to be tortured and executed, and as a blood sacrifice for all the sins of humanity. And that was the only way we could be saved and have eternal life with this God of perfect love and justice. But I ask you, does this scenario sound like perfect love and justice? No, I don't think it does. I think it sounds insane and evil. So just think of this. Imagine somebody killed your wife. Uh, they ran her over with a car by accident or something. And in court, your son stands up and agrees to be executed in lieu of this criminal's actions. He will take the execution. Would you feel better about it? Would you think justice would be served because your son was executed instead of the person who killed your wife? No, that's crazy. So that understanding of the atonement of Christ is not correct. But I know there's other frameworks to understand the atonement and what happened on the cross, but this is the most commonly believed one in American Christianity. And I'm just pointing out how crazy it is. Right? There's also the Christus Victor model from more like the early church, which you can see in like the Chronicles of Narnia. That's a good depiction of it. And there's some other models of the atonement, ways of understanding it, and that's fine too. But this is just an aside, okay? So again, we're told that if we don't believe the right things, if we don't properly analyze the Bible correctly and believe the right things, that we'll go to hell, basically, right? If we have a different understanding of faith and atonement and all these things. Why would an all-living God create the situation where most people are going to go to hell because they lack the ability, they lack the literacy, and they lack the intellect to properly understand this dense ancient text? Like your eternal afterlife, which this 70 years that you have on the earth is but a blip, a snap, a blink in time compared to eternity. This little snap, blink in time, that's all you have to figure out what the Bible is saying. And if you get it wrong, sorry, burn in hell forever. That's not good. That's evil. So, and this is maybe I'm wrong, but I think this is the type of Christianity Wes Huff is defending. This is what he believes ultimately. Okay. Any other questions? So, got into the atonement, the moral failings of Yahweh, and why it's wrong to serve and believe a God like this, even if he is all powerful, even if he created us. Even if he created us, there's still possibility he's not the one true transcendent God of the universe. I mean, you can go look at Gnostic Christianity. That's what they believed. They look back. This is early in the early church. Groups like the Valentinians, like Marcion, the Marcionites, they looked at the Old Testament and saw an evil God, and they concluded that Jesus must have come from a different God, God of perfect love and justice, and Yahweh was a lesser God. And you had to somehow figure out how to get past him and his powerful minions and archons, and get past that evil group of people controlling the world, and beyond that was actually the true God of love and justice that created all of reality, and this world was just a cheap evil facsimile of the true reality, right? So there's different ideas about this, so even if Yahweh is real and powerful and actually created humanity, not worthy of worship, evil, avoid at all costs. Okay, if you can. um all right, so back to apologetics. This is, again, it does all the arguments they make about did Jesus really exist, all the historical scholarship, the dating of the text, all this stuff. It doesn't matter. It's a sideshow. It's a circus. It's meant to distract from the moral problem of Christianity, which we just went over. And it was designed for a society where Christianity was the culturally dominant faith. Okay. And it doesn't really work anymore in terms of convincing non-believers to become Christian. Okay. There was a much more cultural purchase in the past, but it's fading because this is now the post-Christian West. Okay. Oh, this is the judge. I meant to play this when I was talking about atonement. So once Christianity started to be questioned and scientific discoveries were made, it was hard to maintain. And I would say that Islam will probably undergo a similar transformation in the coming decades because of the power of the internet. This was actually from the Scopes monkey trial here in Tennessee, when they had a courtroom, a legal proceeding about whether or not it was okay to teach um, evolution in the schools. There's 2 movies made about it. Inherit the Wind. One, they were the same movie. One was a remake. Pretty good. So Christianity is fading, not just because people doubt its historical claims. It's because its moral framework no longer aligns with modern sensibilities. And maybe you say that's bad and society's falling apart, but and I covered this in some other videos. I mean, yeah, that's true. Christianity was the kind of the framework of the West. So we need to figure out how to have morality and have a sense of right and wrong without Christianity, because Christianity has evil baked into it. So I mean, I'm not trying to say it's all bad. There are some good, precious jewels of the Christian faith that we can take and put into a new system, which, I mean, we're constantly doing. Christianity has evolved over the years. We just need to do better at getting some of the evil stuff out, right? And stop believing that crap. So, okay. So yeah, Wes Huff, he isn't slaying intellectual giants. He's shadowboxing pseudo scholars. So I like watching debates about that kind of stuff because I like the bread and circuses too. But I know what I'm watching. I know that isn't the main point, right? So I would like to see him take on some actual scholars of Christianity. Bart Ehrman, he's a great debater. I'd like to see that. He could, I don't know if Robert Price is still around, but that would be interesting. The guy at Deconstruction Zone, Justin, I think he would be interesting to watch. Anyway, take on some serious guys. Okay. Don't just knock down these low hanging fruit and like, I mean, defeating Billy Carson in a debate about ancient texts is like, you punched a toddler in the face and put your leg on his torso like this, and all the Christians on the internet went, this guy's our champion. I mean, get real. Come on, guys. It's become theater for you guys rather than a meaningful engagement with skepticism. And even if Christianity's claims are true, the moral framework is deeply problematic, to put it lightly. Okay. So I encourage people to think critically about what you believe and why you believe it. Most of us in America and in Europe probably are Christians because that's how we were raised. Okay. Before we could read the Bible and think about these doctrines as an adult, we were taught things about Christianity. So when we picked up the Bible, we read it within that framework. Okay. If you want to read the Bible properly, like a scholar would, you have to figure out how to put down your preconceived notions, your biases, and try to read it with an objective mind. And nobody, I mean, if you read the Bible with an objective view, nobody's going to come to the agreement about Christian doctrines. Okay, that's, I mean, you'd have to torture the text to make them make sense, which is what apologists do. Okay. Uh, even if there's a God worth worshiping, that's an if. It's not going to be found in these ancient Bronze Age barbaric texts dripping with blood and fear and the morality of warriors, people who had to fight and scrap and kill and for everything that they had. Right? Those are not the people you want to get your morality from. You got to look inward, I think, to find the God within. Christ himself is recorded to have said, "Kingdom of God is within you." I think that if you want to find your connection to God, it's in here. It's not in a book, and it's not above you in the sky. Let me just shut this down here. Go to solo mode. Okay, somebody. Oh, another question. Here we go. After you left your faith, did your mental, spiritual, emotional health suffer? Did you live in fear for a while? I have had hiccups in my faith. My life doesn't go well. Thoughts? Yeah, that's a real concern. And I'm not going to lie to you. I did have a period of mental health issues, and I had to, this was all around the time that my dad passed away. And I also adopted these 3 girls, and I was having issues in my marriage, and I had all this stuff happening all at once. And it was during this time that my faith really deconstructed. So it wasn't just that going on, but I didn't have my faith to fall back on and as a source of comfort. And it was really hard, and I had to get on SSRIs for a while. I got off of those. Since I'm sober now, I'm not on anything, but I mean, you really have to dig deep, and you have to do what they call shadow work. It's a concept in Jungian psychology, but this is really, I believe, what you have to do to find peace as a human being. So because we're part ape, because we have these animalistic instincts that to our our rational mind seem to be evil and wrong, because the animal side of us, it's after millions of years of evolution, it's designed to eat and fuck and kill, right? And sleep, right? So we have these urges inside of us, and I'm using the most extreme examples, but it's an ape. You've seen chimpanzees are ferocious. It's not too far off, and we have to dig down deep. We have to get in touch with that part of ourselves and realize that this is just a part of being a human being. We can't let that animal part of ourselves run the show, but we can't hate it and fight against it, because that just causes anxiety, depression. It causes a sense of alienation. So you have to incorporate and love that part of yourself, accept that as a part of who you are. And we have, because of our upbringing and because of traumas we've undergone, we have these disparate parts of ourselves. And it's almost like, you've probably seen that movie Split, where he has multiple personalities. It's not too far off. Most people are walking around like this. We have the personality at work, the personality at church, the personality when we're having sex, the personality when we're on a date, the personality when we're with our parents. We got to bring all these disparate people within us together into one whole person. And we do that through shadow work, discovering even the ugly parts of ourselves that we have buried deep down that we're in denial about, and bringing it to the surface, into the light, and incorporating it back to one whole person, and accepting and loving that person. Because if you're not going to love yourself for who you are, who else is? You're going to be with yourself for the rest of your life. So you got to learn how to love yourself for who you are. And Christianity tells you the opposite, really. It tells you to hate and kill parts of yourself, that you're nothing, that you're a piece of shit covered in snow, like Martin Luther said. That your righteousness is as filthy rags. No one is righteous. No, not. I mean, these teachings cause mental health issues, right? So I would say get with a therapist, get with a counselor. Don't be afraid to do that. Just get on, one of these telehealth platforms, if you can afford it. And, it's hard work. I'm not going to lie. It's hard work. It's not the easiest thing. But I think once you go through that process of deconstruction, you start living life with radical honesty about your faith, about your childhood, about who you are as a person, and accept the fact that you're not all good all the time. Sometimes you're the bad guy, you're the asshole, and that's part. It's okay. Just try not to let that asshole part of you run your life. you know, try to do good every day. But yeah, once you go through that process and come out on the other side, you can breathe. You're not fighting against yourself anymore. You're not split down the middle. You're a whole person. You accept yourself. You accept who you are in the cosmos. You don't know everything. You can have some humility and trust that. I mean, it's a belief, it's speculation, but trust that you are in touch with a loving God who cares about you, and that God is not Yahweh. Okay, that's an actual loving God who would not command genocide and grape and murder and all these things. So I hope that answers your question. Any other questions before I log off here? Got some. Let me see here. I appreciate you guys actually engaging here. That was awesome. Okay, got another viewer. Anybody else have questions before I leave? Before I get out of here? Wes Huff, you in the audience? No? Come on, Wes. I want to hear your response. Tell me why I should worship Yahweh. Okay. Yeah, I'm not going to worship. I'm not going to worship anyone. I mean, why would? Think about. Think about if there's an all-powerful deity, perfect love, perfect justice, that created the universe. Why would he care about receiving worship? Don't It seems to me like the only reason you would want to receive worship is if you're deeply insecure, or you're trying to keep everybody in line like a king. You're trying to keep everybody as like subjects, and you're using that command to worship as a kind of a brainwashing conditioning. Why would you want worship? It doesn't make sense. So yeah, I'm not going to worship God, any God. I'm not going to worship, especially ones that threaten to torture and kill and burn me and my family forever. So not for me. Any responses? Any questions? Give it a few more minutes here. All right, guys. Well, hey, look, I appreciate y'all tuning in, checking out my stream. That was fun. It's a lot better when there's actually people engaged. So I hope we can do this again. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.